recording. There we go. Perfect.
All right.
Yeah, I got
Ryan, I'm just going to ask, Afton, with your group, if you can type in the chat, with your group, are you the only one logging in and is everybody in one room watching this, or are we expecting multiple people to actually log in?
Yeah, that is not. I don't know how to. It's a lot. But eventually, I want to swap that out. I want to get a platform.
The chat too.
Yeah. You gotta put that whole chunk. That way, is what I thought. Yeah. Is that in Canada too? Yeah. So I'm yeah.
Okay, yeah, we got chat disabled for attendees still from the symposium setting. So
Oh, is it? I wonder if I can change that real quick.
okay.
I'm going to assume that they're probably all in one room. I don't know if it will let me change the settings on that.
Okay, well,
Well, as host, you can probably change it from your end. You should be able to go in and
okay.
enable the chat. There's
joining from their own computers.
Okay, there's one more. Okay.
Okay, said they're logging in on their computers. I asked if they are gonna have some more people showing up. Let's see. All right. Yeah, and I should be able to. And chat should be enabled with hosts and panelists now. So
For all attendees, so they should be able to chat now.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go dark and quiet. I'll be in the background.
Okay.
If you need anything.
All right. Well,
since we're recording it, I would say, I mean, I
go ahead.
Maybe give it like 1 or 2 more minutes, and then
yeah,
we probably need to start so we don't run over time because captioning will need to end at 2 o'clock.
That's kind of what I was thinking. We'll just have to.
Great.
Right, okay. All right. Okay. So, just on the chat, ready to move forward. So, if we could describe the visuals as we go, that would be helpful, Molly. And we do have it set to record. So, with that, I will welcome everybody to our webinar on creating accessible digital content. Our presenter will be Molly Wuebker, our Iowa liaison. And with that, I'll turn it over to her and let us get going on this.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Ryan. And thank you, Empower Abilities, for having us. I'm gonna just jump right into it because I know that we have about an hour, and I have a lot of content to go over with you. But as Ryan said, I serve as the Iowa liaison for Great Plains ADA Center, and today we're going to be diving into creating accessible digital content. So, just to give you an overview about the topics that we're going to be covering today, one, just briefly highlighting the legal landscape surrounding digital content. We're going to be diving into PowerPoint accessibility. We're going to be talking about Word and as well as the transferability to Google Docs. We're going to touch on social media. We're going to talk about flyers and then how to use Canva for accessibility, and then also saving those documents, whether it's PowerPoint, Word, etc., into accessible forms. So hopefully we'll be able to capture all of that in the next hour. So first up, in terms of the legal landscape, obviously coming from the Great Plains ADA Center, we'd be remiss if we didn't say the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, which is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life. And that includes digital platforms. So the court precedents have ruled that websites and digital platforms are places of public accommodation under the law. And so Title II guidelines have been updated to ensure that we are following WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, in order to make these public accommodations accessible. So these Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, they were developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C for short, and they offer 3 levels of accessibility. There's A, there's double A, and there's triple A. And so A is kind of good, double A is better, triple A is best. Right now, WCAG 2.1 level 2A is the definitive standard for the ADA. So that is what they were requiring places of public accommodation, or Title II entities, excuse me, to achieve. So one of the things, as I was kind of brought into the loop about what to kind of prioritize for this presentation, I know that we wanted to highlight Google Docs as well as Canva. But one thing I just kind of wanted to start off with is really, what should the workflow be when we are creating accessible documents? So in terms of Word and PowerPoint, essentially just Microsoft Office, that is really where you want to start and build your accessible templates or your documents, because Word and PowerPoint have built-in accessibility features and built-in checkers already. And so when we start there, then we can kind of add to it as we go. Whereas Google Docs and Slides doesn't have that built-in accessibility checker. So, you can build that accessible template in Word and PowerPoint. And then once you feel like it's an accessible template, you could then always share it for collaboration in Google Docs and Slides. But I wouldn't do it the opposite way. I wouldn't start with Google Docs and Slides because you're just going to end up having to do probably a lot more work on the back end once it's downloaded. And then for Canva, so Canva is really used for design elements only. It should never be the base for accessible documents. And I'm going to talk about that here a little bit later and how it can be used and how we can still make sure that those elements are accessible. And then after you've maybe added, let's say you've gone to Google Docs and you've collaborated on it, you've added some design elements from Canva, then you always want to go back to Word and PowerPoint and then use the check for accessibility feature again. So we're starting with Word and PowerPoint, and then we're ending with Word and PowerPoint because that is where they have those built-in accessibility features that are basically the kind of the best tools out there right now for accessibility. So that's the workflow that I kind of wanted to highlight before we dive in. So in talking about PowerPoint, and since I'm using a PowerPoint today, I'm actually going to be switching over to the working mode in PowerPoint to actually show you in real time kind of how to do some of these things. And so when I get to the working mode, if you do have this PowerPoint, I do encourage you to download, open it, and actually try to follow along with me and do some of the same things that I'm doing. Because I think it's just kind of the best way for us to learn is when we kind of first see and then do. So when we talk about PowerPoint, we're going to talk about their check accessibility feature. We're going to talk about layouts and slide master. Reading order is a big one. Unique slide titles, alt text. And alt text is really going to be able to be applied, whether it's PowerPoint, whether it's a Word document, whether it's Canva. Alt text is a big thing, no matter what kind of digital content or software system you're using. We're going to talk about text in color, same thing. It's transferable to other software. Links as well, lists and tables, and audio and video features. So we're going to get a lot of things that are transferable to other just in PowerPoint, but we're also going to touch on some specific features in PowerPoint too. So in terms of checking accessibility, so there's a tool in PowerPoint that checks the slides, the images, and the text for accessibility issues. So it's going to flag any issues such as missing alt text, whether there's unclear or low contrast text, improper reading order, and more. And so to manually launch, we're going to select the review feature and then check accessibility. So I'm going to actually switch to the working mode of PowerPoint now, and then I'm going to have to reshare that. So you should be able to actually see the working mode side. And that's where we have our ribbon and our toolbar and everything is listed there. So in this working mode, there and on the kind of main navigation or toolbar, there is the word review. And that's kind of the big one when we talk about accessibility. So I'm going to click on review and then it will drop down and there'll be an option for check accessibility. There's basically a document and kind of that inclusivity icon next to it. So I'm going to click on that. And when I click on it, I'm going to see if I can move that out of my way. There we go. When I click on it, then on the right-hand side of the screen is going to be basically a list and your accessibility assessment that's going to show what issues exist within this PowerPoint. So like I said earlier, it could be anything from hard to read text contrast, missing alt text, missing audio or video subtitles. So it's a very, very helpful tool. So here in the next slide, we're going to talk about layouts. And layouts are really helpful to use because they already have placeholders for text, videos, pictures, and more. And so it's really helpful when we can use layouts, these kind of built-in pre-designed slide designs that contain those placeholders already, because they're already then set up in the appropriate reading order, which just means you're going to have less work on the back end. So the more that you can kind of stick to those pre-designed layouts that exist, the better. If you add text or you just add or drop in pictures, it's going to end up kind of changing the reading order, which is just going to add more time for you on the back end. So you can kind of look at the look for kind of these different types of layouts on the View tab. So again, going back up to kind of that main navigation within PowerPoint, the View tab, and then selecting Normal. And then on the Design tab, do one or the following. You're going to expand the Themes gallery, and you're going to select the slide layout that you want. So all of these, when you click on Design, all of these are kind of these pre-designed layouts that you can use that already have those placeholders in. So again, the more that we can use that, the better. And that also goes, I know sometimes there's on PowerPoint, they'll have design suggestions or design ideas. Again, these are kind of pre-designed layouts, so you're welcome to use those as well. Now, Slide Master is a way where you can actually customize unique slide layouts while kind of ensuring accessibility standards for all the slides. So let's say you find a layout that you want, but you want to kind of customize it. And instead of having to go to every single slide and change everything, that's within that kind of pre-designed layout, you can go to the slide master and you can change things on just that one slide master, whether it's the color of a font, whether it's the type of font, whatever it might be. And so you can change even those placeholders or adjust them. So then it's very much consistent throughout the entire presentation. So again, these are things that if we can do those kind of up front, it's going to minimize any your time that it takes to make it accessible on the back end. So again, a way to get to Slide Master is you're going to go back to that View tab in that main navigation, and then you'll find that there's actually a tab called Slide Master. So we'll click on that. And then this will be kind of the main slide master, and you can kind of change these to be whatever font you want. And then we can kind of make different kind of layouts and make it however we want to make it. And then that will be kind of transferable and it make it consistent on the other end. So it's just kind of a helpful way to make things more consistent and reduce, all of the reviews on the accessibility side. All right, so I'm going to go back and close the master. So for the reading order pane, this is a really big one. And the reason why the reading order pane is really big is that this is how we ensure that the content is being read in the intended sequence. A lot of screen readers, for example, they are going to basically read the text based off of how the reading order pane is set up. And so we don't want it to the reading order to have the title, but then the next one, it jumps to maybe the slide number, because that's not going to make a lot of sense. And it might be confusing for a screen reader. So how we look at the reading order is we're going to go back to the Review tab, and we are going to, and I can actually go to the Check Accessibility, and I can go to the reading order pane for this slide. And I can see kind of what order this reading order pane is set up. So I have the title right now is set up to be number 1. And then I have the main content placeholder next, this area right here, that's in the middle that has all kind of the body of the text. And then the next one is the slide number. So it's basically going to go title, content placeholder, slide number. Now, there also is this main navigation, which is the basically kind of the section up at the top, but I marked it as decorative, so it's not really important. So every time you go to that slide, as long as you mark something as decorative, it shouldn't impact the reading order for screen readers. Now, one thing I want to note is that depending on PowerPoint, although this might have been updated as of recently, and I think actually it has been, because before my PowerPoint updated into the newest version, it actually had reading order called selection pane. So if you, let's say you open up your PowerPoint for any reason, and instead of having it be called reading order, it's called selection pane, those two things are the same thing. The only thing is that if it says reading order pane, you want to make sure that all of your items, all of the objects, your text are arranged from top to bottom. So right now, my title, my content, and then my slide number is top to bottom. Now, if yours says selection pane, it's going to be the opposite. You'd want it to be where the title is actually at the bottom and your slide number placeholder is at the top. So it's kind of confusing right now because there's some different versions of PowerPoint. I think they might have updated that, but it might just be something to double check. So if yours says selection pane, then you're actually going to have the title be at the bottom and your slide number be at the top. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, speaking of slide titles, so slide titles really kind of serve as a roadmap for screen readers. So it's really important to use descriptive titles for each slide that are a concise summary of its main points. So you want to kind of avoid generic titles like slide 1 and instead use very meaningful descriptors that can capture the essence of the slide information. And you also want to avoid duplicating slide titles. So for example, on this PowerPoint, I have 2 slides that start with slide titles. But I also kind of differentiated them by having slide titles 1 of 2, and then the next slide says slide titles 2 of 2. So that's telling a person, a screen reader, that there's 2 slides that have slide titles as the title in total. So they kind of, again, know where they're at on that roadmap and know what what's the topic going to be related to that. So just trying to kind of avoid those duplicative slide titles is really important, and having something that's beyond just slide 1. So now we're going to be talking about alt text. And again, alt text is also a pretty important one, not just from a PowerPoint perspective, but also if we're working in Word, if you're working in Canva, if you're doing something in social media, we have to have alt text. That is a web content accessibility guideline that we have to meet. So basically, alt text is providing a text alternative for non-text content, excuse me. So how you're going to do that is select the image, and then you can use picture format. So this is specifically related to PowerPoint. Picture format, and then there should be an alt text button where you can then type a description in that description field. So within the visible body of text near the image or presented on a separate page is another option. So if you don't want to necessarily put it in that alt text area, or for some reason there isn't alt text on any of the softwares that you're using, let's say they don't have that built in as an option, then your second option is to add the alt text as a visible body of text near the image or presented on a separate page. So sometimes I've seen it, like, let's say in social media, where if somebody is posting something, they'll have an image, and then underneath that, they'll have image description, and then they'll write it out versus having it not visible. Instead, it's kind of coded in on the back end. So if the image itself also includes text, the description should include what that text is. Because again, a screen reader isn't going to be able to read what that text is in that image. A JPEG or a PNG is not readable by a screen reader. So it's important that if there is text, you're actually writing that text in the alt text itself. Also, though, there is the option to mark an image as decorative if it's really only used for visual formatting. So if it's not adding anything to your content or to the learning, then you can mark it as decorative. So for example, in my PowerPoint here, you can see there is a gray banner that's at the very top of the slide. That's just simply there for decoration. So I haven't listed it as alt text because it's not really important to the context of this presentation. It's just there for decoration. So on the next slide, we have an actual image. And so I want us to practice actually writing alt text. So if you are able, I want you to look at or select the image or look at the image and write into whether it's the chat or I guess the Q&A, maybe the chat box, write in how you would actually describe this image that's on the screen. And I'll give you a minute to type in an alt text example. Okay, I've had one come through, a blue whale with talking lines with blue text that says Jaws. So that's one example. And I think that is a very good example. a blue whale with talking lines with blue text that says Jaws. So I'm actually going to select this image, and then I'm going to select picture format. That's back in the main navigation. And then when I do that, there's an option to toggle alt text. And so I can go over to then the sidebar that will pop up, which is where you can then insert that alt text. So here is an example. It says blue shark talking with text Jaws. So just another kind of example of we're just saying basically it's a shark that's talking with the text Jaws. So what you added in there is also good as well. So just kind of an example. The nice thing about PowerPoint too is it does kind of give you guidelines when you click on alt text of how would you describe this object and its context to someone who is blind or has low vision. So it says include the subject in detail, maybe the setting, the actions. So in this case, the whale is talking, and any other relevant information like the fact that there's the text Jaws in it. So once you do that and have that in there, then that's captured, and a screen reader should be able to read it. So now when we go to and talk about text, really when it comes to the WCAG, it's recommending readable text. It doesn't necessarily require sans serif, but it's highly recommended to use sans serif fonts. Also, using bold, italics, or underlining sparingly is also advised. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but just really want to be mindful about the amount that you're doing it. Also, using fonts, using like the CamelCase. So, just as you would write a sentence with the first letter being capitalized and the rest of it being lowercased, that's really what's recommended versus having it all be all cap letters. That's a lot easier to read CamelCase than it is to do all caps. So just another thing to be mindful of. The reason why we should kind of use underlining sparingly is because underlining is oftentimes used to differentiate links within a text. So if you underline something, it might then be assumed by that person that that is a clickable link. And so the less we can kind of use underlining, the better. And that's where, especially if we're working in a Word doc, using kind of headers and the styles pane is going to be advisable to kind of differentiate and highlight things in a hierarchy or priority. And I'll show you that in a little bit. But also we want to ensure the text is large enough to be easily read from afar. So the recommended minimum font size for the body of the text is 18-point font and 24-point or larger for headings. So really, when you're working within the kind of the body of the text, you want to try not to go less than 18-point font as much as possible. And then when the font size is below the minimum, you might want to then adjust the character spacing and length. So if for some reason the font size does have to be less than 18-point, then how you can kind of work around that is by adjusting those character spaces and the length so that it makes it a little bit more easier to read. So those are all kind of guidelines or ways to help ensure that the text is readable. So when we talk about color, there is a colorblind friendly palette external link that I've inserted into this PowerPoint that I recommend that you visit kind of in your own time, that you can kind of see the palettes that the color palettes that are used that are colorblind friendly. But it's also important that we don't rely on color alone to convey information. And that's really true when it comes to like links again. So one of the things that is advised is not only do we underline a link, but we also differentiate it by color. So from a link perspective, we're not just relying on that, let's say blue color. of a link, we're also conveying that it is a link because it's underlined. So there's two different ways to convey that. Because if it is blue, if a person who is colorblind, they still might not be able to differentiate that that's a link unless there is an actual underline underneath it. So one of the things, a tool out there that exists is the TPGI Color Contrast Analyzer. Now, this is a free tool that can be downloaded onto a Mac or kind of PC device. And it's really helpful because it can basically kind of overlay onto whatever is on your desktop or screen at the time to compare that color contrast. So I'm actually going to pull that up here right now to show you. And actually, I should make sure that you can see it. Not sure that you'll be able to see that unless I stop share for a second. And I'm just going to share my desktop. So then hopefully you'll be able to see both. So how I can do this is with the color contrast analyzer, I have kind of this little eyedropper here. And so for pure red, I'm going to check to see if pure red and just white as the background is going to pass the 4.5 to 1 contrast ratio that's required for WCAG 2.1. So when I click that, it will show up here that the contrast ratio is 4 to 1. So it doesn't quite pass the 4.5 to 1 color contrast ratio that is required. Now, if we try pure green, I'll go here and I selected, oops, I don't know that it did it. Let's try it again. There we go. So now I have green and white, and this definitely fails. So this is 1.4 to 1. Now the last one is pure blue. So I'm going to select that one. And when I select that one, now the contrast ratio jumps to 8 to 1, and it passes the WCAG 2.1 results. So this can just be a really nice tool to have, whether you're working in PowerPoint, whether you're working in Canva, whatever you are creating, and making sure that your text and your background color meet the color contrast ratios. So now when we go and we're going to talk about links. So when we talk about links, kind of in the same way that you want to be descriptive with your slide titles, you also want to be descriptive with your links. So you want to avoid things like click here, learn more, or putting the entire URL, because if you add the entire URL, then that screen reader is going to read that entire URL. And some URLs are pretty long. So for downloadable links, you want to also try to inform the users of the file format and the size. So let's say you have a PDF, actually adding that it is a PDF and the file size into that the hyperlink text provides individuals or screen readers with information of, one, this is a PDF, so it's going to open up into a new tab. And this is how big it is. And do I have enough storage to be able to open it or even save it? So it's giving them information within that hyperlink text, which can be really helpful. It's also telling them exactly, if you click on it, what is this? This is a WCAG 2 checklist. Like I mentioned earlier, you also don't want to rely on color only when distinguishing a link. And when you're using links and even bookmarks and slide content, you want to consider adding a destination cue in that link text. So let's say for this, I have added a link to the WebAIM links and hypertext. So it's basically just another resource for you to go and learn more about how to incorporate links into your document. But it's an external link, and it's external link to WebAIM, which is a really knowledgeable and reputable resource in regards to web content accessibility guidelines. And so it's telling you that this is going to take you to a different place. So if you're on a website and it says external link, it's going to take you to an entirely different destination. Again, that's allowing individuals, especially people who are screen readers, with the knowledge to know, do I want to go to this separate destination? So when it comes to lists, we also want to use different types of lists to group information according to its nature. So unordered lists, for example, are best when marked with a bullet or used when the order of the items is not really relevant. So if you were typing out a grocery list and it really doesn't matter what that grocery list is or what the order of it is, it's just these are all the things that we need to get when we're at the grocery store, and it's on your phone for you to pull up, you would want to use an unordered list or use the bullets. Now, if we were had a list on our phone and it was steps to take what we got at the grocery store and now do a recipe of ingredients. Now we'd want to use an ordered list, which is marked by numbers because it's being provided in sequential information. It's important that we know what we should do first and then what we should do next. So that is another way of communicating to individuals who use screen readers that this is an order list. This is kind of ranked based off of priority and sequence. And then there's also just even description lists that can be created, using headings. So the title, the subtitle, and then those content placeholders are other ways to kind of show a hierarchy and kind of break it down for individuals when they're using a screen reader. We also want to try to avoid tables as much as you can. But if you must use tables, there are some guidelines that you can use to kind of make it more accessible. So you want to kind of avoid fixed width tables for one, and then also make sure that the tables and the content reader or content renders and reads properly. And then also edit the links that may break mid-sentence, and use table headers. So place your cursor in the table. So I'm going to go actually to the next slide to show you this, but you're going to place your cursor in the table. You're going to click Table Design tab, and then you're going to click Table Styles option group and make sure that the header row checkbox is checked. So if I click on, in my next slide, the table, and I click on Table Design, and then you'll see over here that their header row is checked. And that's important because it's basically categorizing each of those columns. So that, and in this case, it has one column that says accessible, and underneath that, responsive widths and links that are appropriately placed. And then you have another column with the header row being not accessible, and underneath that is fixed width and links that break mid-sentence. So this is a table that's kind of showing you what is and is not accessible when it comes to using tables. But to be accessible, we want to make sure that the header row is selected. And again, this goes for if you're using PowerPoint, and it goes for if you're using Word as well. When it comes to audio and video features, enabling built-in captioning or subtitle features, or even manually adding captions and subtitles to your PowerPoint videos is highly recommended. So for example, we have a closed captioner here. If we didn't have that, there is a way to actually add in your slideshow, if you are presenting, the check always use subtitles. So while the person is presenting, then it would actually capture what they're presenting, and individuals in the classroom would be able to read what are those subtitles. And I do recognize that subtitles and closed captioning aren't necessarily the same thing, but it could be a tool if, let's say, you don't know exactly your audience members that may or may not need additional assistance. It might just be a nice add-on to say, hey, I'm going to add this, because I know personally that if I have subtitles or even closed captioning available to me, I like it more from a learning perspective. Like when I'm reading and listening at the same time, I absorb that information so much better. So it might just be even from a way to enhance learning. It might be better that way too. It's kind of a form of universal design in a sense. So, also offering alternative audio tracks or descriptions and describing visual content, actions, and important details that may not be discernible from the audio alone. So, like there was that request earlier of making sure that we're describing any images that are on the screen. That is obviously good practice, no matter if you're presenting content, wanting to make sure that you're describing those things. So now we're going to jump to flyers. So that's kind of the gist of PowerPoint. Now, PowerPoint can be used, right, in terms of the workflow for flyers. So you could start to kind of build your flyer in PowerPoint. So what I have on the screen here is another table of kind of do's and don'ts when it comes to flyer. Now, under the do column, we have do download a Word or PowerPoint file to check accessibility. So again, going back to that workflow of you always want to still check your flyer in Word or PowerPoint. Do provide a transcript of the entire flyer if it is saved as an image. Do provide a URL when providing a QR code, because if a person let's say they're actually accessing the information from their phone versus a desktop, that QR code isn't really going to necessarily always be helpful if they're looking at the QR from their phone. So having an additional URL is going to be important because that's how they're going to access it. Also, flattening graphics with multiple layers before importing them into your flyer is going to be helpful. And I have a slide that's going to talk a little bit more about that. So just hang tight there. But last then is do include a link to download Google Translate. So, I always also like to remember that people with disabilities might not all speak English as their first language. And so it's important too to also have, instructions or tools where they could maybe download into Google Translate, or if you know that you're going to be speaking with an audience that has a large, Spanish speaking audience or whatever it might be, having another alternative, maybe in a Google Doc, where they could then download that and that's readable could be another option. Also, in terms of the don't column, don't rely on Canva for accessibility features. And I'm going to talk more about that too. Don't use an image flyer without a transcript. Because remember, again, a lot of times I'll see online, like social media posts, they'll have flyers that will be attached, and that's kind of it. The flyer is used, it's an image usually, and it's used as a way to convey information. But for individuals who are screen readers, that they're not going to be able to read that. So you want to either have like a transcript or basically in the post itself, you want to relay everything that was also in that flyer. So you're having it kind of in two different ways. Don't just provide the QR code. Like I said, don't use graphics with multiple layers, and don't forget to consider language translations. There's also a link on this slide from the Universal Design Center, Flyers and Infographics. It's a PDF that you can also check and for additional information when it comes to flyers. So let's talk about Canva. So I mentioned just before about not or flattening graphics. I think it was the word that was used, flattening graphics, and really kind of trying to group them together into one. So what I mean by that is, especially when we're in Canva, and you're designing something, you might have multiple design elements that you are kind of putting together to make one large design. But when you download that without grouping them, they're all going to be individual, images. And so you're going to then need to have alt text for each one of those. So the example that I have on here is there's 3 images, but really the image in total is candles that are lit and a person's hand that is trying to light one of those candles. but it's kind of separated into 3 different images that have all been combined to create this one big image. Now, to make this accessible when it gets transferred over to PowerPoint or if it gets transferred over to Word, is I want to group those images and elements. And that can also include icons, text boxes, shapes before exporting. So then it's really transferring as a single object. You can also, when you group them together, you can also then right click and you can download that selection as a PNG or a JPEG and then insert it directly into the slide or document. And so then it's inserted as one image once you've grouped it all in Canva. So that's something that I always recommend from the Canva perspective is if you're working in Canva, is trying to kind of group images into one before you go and then transfer it to a Word or a PowerPoint presentation. And then maybe just download it and drop it into your presentation or to the placeholder for an image, whatever kind of pre-designed layout you've decided to use. So that's kind of what the recommendation when we talk about flattening graphics, because a lot of graphics can have multiple layers to them. And that could get really busy and really confusing for a screen reader because they're going to read all of those graphics unless they're marked as decorative or unless they're grouped as one. Now, when we're saving in accessible formats, it's important to note that we want to save files in the appropriate file format, which is PowerPoint or Doc, to retain those accessibility features. Saving files as an accessible PDF document can happen in one of 2 ways. You can either select the Acrobat tab. So like on my screen here, I have Acrobat and then I have Create PDF. And so then that will transfer and it should, for the most part, transfer all of the accessibility revisions and features that I have saved in this PowerPoint. That's one way to do that. You can also select file and save as. What you don't want to do is export it as a PDF because when we export as a PDF, oftentimes the accessibility changes that we make get lost in that transfer over to PDF. They don't always work together the way that we would like them to. So it's just important that we either use Create PDF under the Acrobat tab or File Save As. So now I'm going to talk about Word. Now, Word has a very similar check accessibility feature, and I'll show you that in just a second. There's a couple kind of new things in Word that I'm going to highlight, like talking about headings, indentations and paragraph spacing, as well as readability. But the other things that are also important in Word, which is the same as in PowerPoint, is alt text, is text in color, links, lists, and tables. So all the things that I previously talked about are going to be transferable or generalizable to Word. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to stop sharing here and I'm actually going to open up a Word document. Whoops, hold on one second. Let me try that again. And I believe this should have been shared as like a supplementary document. So hopefully you have that as well. And then it can be used as maybe an accessible template for you too. So I've pulled up creating accessible Word documents. This is a Word document. And just like PowerPoint, they have the review tab up kind of in the main navigation, and they have check accessibility. So we can go over to the accessibility assistant that should pull up on your sidebar to the right and see kind of all of the different things that it looks at: color contrast, missing alt text, tables, your document structure. So in this case, headings. So headings is really a big one when it comes to Word. So headings are kind of used basically to create the structure of the document and are really necessary for the ease of navigation using a screen reader. They are assigned using the style toolbar. So what basically, or how you go about doing this, I go back to home and that's where I'm going to find styles or styles pane. So I'm going to click on that and you're going to see on the right hand side another kind of drop down section will appear, and it's going to show you kind of all of these different styles. The really important ones are heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, etc., as well as title. So from a screen reader perspective, if I click on creating accessible Word documents, then title should appear. This has been labeled or assigned the correct heading of title. So a screen reader is going to know, okay, this is the title. So it's kind of showing what the hierarchy is of this document. Next, I'm going to go and I'm going to select headings, and that is selected as heading 1. So we're kind of creating this hierarchy of important information. So if I have heading 1, then under that should be kind of normal text. So that normal text is going to be talking about headings. Next, I have text. Text is selected as heading 1 again, because it's kind of another heading within that Word document. Now, underneath that, under that heading 1 of text, I have 2 sections. I have section 101, paragraph spacing, which has been labeled now heading 2. And I also have readability, which is labeled as heading 2. And underneath both of those heading 2s, I have text to describe those. So this, again, it's just a really helpful tool to help screen readers navigate that Word document and create that hierarchy and that organization for them. So for paragraph spacing, going back to that, indentations and paragraph spacing really should be used in Word document for structure, because this really prevents that screen reader from reading blank spaces and lines and avoids the need upon conversion to PDF to artifact those elements. So it's important that when we go up here to our kind of our toolbar under the home navigation tab, that we are using the indentation, increase indent, decrease indent, rather than using like spacing, clicking the space bar over and over and over. Because this is going to, because if we click on the space bar over and over, a screen reader actually might say space, 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 space. And that can get repetitive and a little bit annoying when you are trying to read what a document says. Now, for readability, readability is just another kind of tip that I'm providing because I think it's really helpful because it's under the tools menu. So, and for that, I have to go up to Word and kind of the main, again, navigation at the top, and I click on spelling and grammar. And then there is kind of another drop down where I can select editor. And when I select editor, it's going to give me an editor score. So it says here 96%, which is pretty good. It says kind of looks and checks my spelling. And that can be really important to, you know, whether you use a screen reader or not, having appropriate spelling and grammar are going to be helpful. But one of the really nice things is the insights box that's below. So I might move this up so you can see a little better. So there's the insights box, and I select that, and it will pull up, I'm not sure if it's pulling it up for you or not, but it pulls up readability statistics. So it tells me how many words there are, how many characters. But one of the big things that I'm interested in is the Flesch Kincaid grade level. So it tells me that this is at a 9th to close to a 10th grade reading level. So if I am interested in creating a document that has plain language, then I want to make sure that I'm looking at that readability to make sure that I'm writing it at a grade level that's using plain language, which typically kind of ranges at like that 8th to 9th grade reading level. And so that's kind of a goal. If we want to have kind of a plain language version, that you use that readability, that can be a helpful tool to kind of check. So now I'm going to talk, and using the Word document, I'm going to talk about just social media posts and just some little tips there as well. So I just wrote a social media post example to kind of talk through and describe some of the things that can be helpful. So for example, it has thanks to at Great Plains ADA Center for presenting on the topic of digital accessibility for at Empower Abilities. Here's some simple ways that we can all make a difference when posting on social media. So one, it's place emojis and hashtags at the end of sentences to avoid interruptions. So a lot of times I've seen where emojis and hashtags, they'll get kind of put in front of kind of the body or the text. And again, a screen reader is going to read all of those, and it might just make it confusing if you just have random emojis that are thrown in there in that body of text. So it can just get really confusing that way. Also using alt text again to describe images to screen reader users. And you want to make sure that if you are adding emojis, well, that is an image. So you also want to make sure to check alt text for that. And there is a resource that I have hyperlinked here called emojipedia.org, and it's an external link that already has all of the alt text for very common emojis that are used right now. So rather than having to maybe reinvent the wheel, if you have an emoji that you want to use, you could go to emojipedia.org and they will already have the alt text that you can copy and paste and drop right into whatever kind of social media platform you're using. Now, most social media platforms, they have the ability when you add a picture to then click that edit button, and there should be either like an accessibility tab or an alt text tab where you can add that in there. Most at this point social media platforms have that ability. Again, if they don't, then you can just add that alt text into the actual post itself using like image description. That's another way that you can do it. So just like I described earlier when talking about fonts, so CamelCase hashtags for screen reader users are really best practice. So rather than doing like hashtag accessibility matters and all lowercase, that is not going to be screen reader friendly because a screen reader is going to not read those as two separate words. It's going to read it as ACCESSIBILITY and so forth. It's not going to read it because it's all lowercase. Now, when you add and make accessibility a capital A and matters a capital M, now it reads it as two different words. So hashtag accessibility matters or hashtag Americans with Disabilities Act. Everything is capital. That's a really helpful tool or tip when you're posting anything on social media. There is also a link that I provided on here called Social Media Advisories. It's another external link that provides a scoop on accessibility supports and limitations related to popular social media platforms that I recommend everybody kind of checks out and looks at as well. So I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to go back to my slide. I'm near the end and then we can take some questions. But I just want to pull up and show that we have just some different resources that are available. Again, I mentioned WebAIM earlier. WebAIM is really the reputable resource for anything related to web content accessibility guidelines. So they have a lot of great information related to PowerPoint accessibility and just WCAG in general. Microsoft Accessibility Guide for PowerPoint is another really great resource. Microsoft has a lot of great resources related to accessibility using their platforms. Section 508 also has a resource for creating accessible presentations that I wanted to kind of direct you to. And then the rest is kind of some references that I used for this presentation. So with that, I will stop talking and I'll see what questions anybody has or anything that they want me to revisit.
I am not seeing anything pop up in either the chat or the Q&A right now, Molly.
And that is okay. I find a lot of times when I give these presentations, it's one of those we have to process all of this and look and maybe watch it again and then we'll have questions and we can and always kind of send it out. And that's why we're here. So hopefully those of you at Empowerabilities, feel free to always reach out. If you're actually in the midst of making something, you're like, gosh, what were we supposed to do there again? Reach out to us. I think my contact information is on the very last slide here. And so
Did
you
have one pop up real quick, Molly? Sorry.
can bet.
If there is documentation or flyers already created, what would be the best tool to remediate?
So the best tool to remediate would be either to put it to a Word document or to put it to PowerPoint. So if it's a flyer with a lot of images in it, I would probably recommend PowerPoint and then using the check accessibility review tab. If it has like a lot of text and it would be better to kind of use as using the kind of the headings feature or the styles pane, then it would be best to use Word. But that's how I operate. And my work is if there's an already made flyer, I'm always going to take it back to either PowerPoint or Word.
We got to thank you on that. With that, we're at 1:59, Molly. So
Awesome. All right. Well, of course, if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to reach out via email that's on the screen there. Or you can reach out to Ryan too. And either way, we'll get you answers. So thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful Labor Day weekend.
thank you, Molly. Excellent presentation. I know I learned quite a bit myself watching it. Thank Empower Abilities for having us, and Captioner, Lisa took everybody to put this on, and have a great weekend.
Yes, thank you.